Always be recording. Trick. Step number 1, always be recording. Should have brought my own paper too. Ready? Like, what's happening? 1. We'll start with 1. All right, start with chicken. So chicken is a pretty easy protein. Usually you'll see more sales on chicken than you will on red meat, just because we have a lot of chicken factories in the United States and we gotta push that meat out of there and make that money. You're gonna find your cheapest cuts of meat at places that have a butcher shop in the store, where they're gonna get primal cuts, which is gonna be a larger cut of meat from a farm. Do you want some chicken? It's okay. I wouldn't buy that though. No, I'm totally kidding. I'm just kidding.
You look like a blogger about healthy.
We love people. We try. So, chicken. You want something that has like a nice color to it, that's not too pale looking, and something that is not too pink. Like this for me is almost a little too pink, and probably for me is why it's in the front, because they want us to take it sooner. This pinkness right here, not a super huge fan of it. I don't want something that looks gray. I want something that looks like bright and fresh and nice and juicy. I personally don't like buying meats that are ground unless you're really making burgers. Ground meats have a tendency to carry more bacteria, and you're more susceptible to getting foodborne illnesses, especially if you're like taking your car going somewhere. Ground meat, not my favorite thing. Chicken cutlets I find super unnecessary. Don't be a bitch, buy a chicken breast, cut it into chicken cutlets. Because right here, what is it? You get thin sliced chicken cutlets, $3.59 a pound. I have a pound is $4, right? About. So right here, I have a little under 3 pounds of chicken breast, and it's like $6. That's like a no-brainer to me, because one chicken breast I'm gonna get 5 cutlets out of. So 5 cutlets, so 5, 10, I'm getting 15 cutlets for $6 or 4 cutlets for $4. Suck it. Someone actually just asked me something interesting about grilling things. What kind of meat to choose when you're grilling versus doing other things. The grill is very high heat, so if you go for something thinner, it's gonna dry out a lot faster. If you do something thicker or something that has a bone, which I prefer, the collagen and the marrow from the bone actually seeps out into the meat, and you get those nutrients, which your body really needs, as well as keeping your meat very moist while it's grilling. Bones are good. You make bone broth out of them. They add moisture to grilling items. There's a million things you can do with it. Don't shy away from something because it has a bone in it. When it comes to white meat, usually saves you money as well, because that is our mindset that bones are bad, but they're really not. I feed the raw bones to our dog. You can save them to make stock and broth for yourself or your pets. There's a lot of things you can do with it. Nothing should ever go to waste. But as I was saying about primal cuts, a primal cut is like the whole animal. Like a chicken, a primal cut is the whole chicken. For a cow, it's like they cut the back, the ass and the arms, and then they ship all that out. And then you have subprimal cuts, which are going to be like your New York strip, your filet, your porterhouse, all those other smaller cuts that come out of a bigger cut. But when the butcher shop does their own butchering and breaking down like the breasts and the thighs from the primal cuts they get and package themselves in-house, you're gonna get a better price than you will if you go somewhere like Stop and Shop that, yeah, they have a butcher, but they don't do that there. They're not really trained for that. They buy everything pre-packaged, pre-labeled, and put it on the shelves. That costs a lot more than if they were to just break it down in-house. Somewhere like where we are. Honestly, Fairway has the same prices that the Spanish market in our town has. Our chicken's $1.99 a pound, which is a great deal. And that's because they do a lot of their own butchering in-house, which is awesome. Things that I avoid are things that look easy, things like this. When I was in school, they always taught us that if something is mixed with other things like this, whether it's spices or vegetable, it's because they're trying to hide something from you, whether the meat is old and they need to turn it and make it go somewhere, or generally that's the only reason why. They're trying to get rid of something and push it off the shelf. So as a general rule, I try and avoid things that are pre-seasoned or pre-mixed. You don't know where those vegetables came from. You don't know how old that stuff was that went into it. You don't know how old the meat is. And technically, once they mix it, the date that they put on it is the date they mixed it. They no longer have to tell you when that meat came into the store, because their recent work date is when they mixed everything in. And that is a horrible thought to me, because it could have been sitting on the shelves for 2 weeks and then they put spices into it and tried to sell it to you again for another week. Whole chicken. This whole chicken, it's the same price as the chicken breast. So if you don't want to do all the work, you can get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 6 breasts, $1.99. Chicken freezes pretty well if you package it right. And we're gonna move to red meat because people want chicken. Is it happening? It's happening. One thing I want to say about chicken is salmonella. Salmonella is a foodborne illness or pathogen that is generally transferred through the undercooking or improper holding of chicken or from the human ingestion of raw chicken. So salmonella is something that dogs cannot contract. So dogs can eat raw chicken and raw chicken bones. They cannot eat cooked chicken bones. They'll like shred in their throat and stuff, and then they die, and that's not good. But we can get salmonella as humans because I'm a human. Are you? If we ingest raw chicken, or like I got raw chicken on my hands, I don't want to be touching my phone and putting my phone to my face, or like touching other things that's going to be close to my mouth or put me in a position where I could potentially get sick. So I make sure that my chicken is cooked through. Once you cool it after you cook it, just make sure you heat it up and get it hot enough to kill any of that bacteria. Usually between, around about like 40 to 75 degrees is your danger point for food. And it's a very scary business, and just try and keep most of your stuff out of that. It needs to be really hot or kept really cold. Kind of that room temperature is not super safe. Red meat. Marbling is something that's super important, and a word that I feel most people aren't really aware of or what it means, is that kind of look of something kind of swirling in another color within that base color. You need to see that in your red meat in order to have like optimal flavor and really pick something that's gonna give you what you want from a cut of red meat. Let's take a look. You have the red, which is the meat, obviously, and you see those white tendrils that kind of like run throughout the meat. That is considered your marbling. That is literally fat that is kind of inside the meat and inside of our meat and all meat. And some cuts, like this ribeye steak, beautiful with that bone in there, love a bone in the meat, is gonna be a really nice flavorful piece of meat. When you add heat to this, those fatty marbling tendrils in there are gonna slowly, I ate my own hair, slowly going to like melt and absorb into the actual meat and really give you a nice, juicy, succulent piece of red meat to nibble on. Skirt steak is a long cut, usually from, I want to say that's from like the belly of the animal. The skirt and the hanger steak are kind of those like middle body portions of the animal, and there's a little more fat running through those than a flank steak, which is right next to it. Similar cut, similar texture. Both are a little kind of like stringier, and that's something that you really want to usually like cut into strips. Not really my favorite as like a steak, just because it doesn't like pull apart super nice. It doesn't cut super clean. It is kind of like shreds. While something like the ribeye is a really nice grilling steak. Tenderloin. Tenderloin, I think, is a lot of hype. The tenderloin is actually a subcut from a larger subprimal cut, which you would know is like a T-bone or a porterhouse. A T-bone or porterhouse is a T-shaped bone, and you have a little bit of the fillet on one side, and then the entire other side is a New York strip. So when you get that T-bone, not only do you have the bone in, which adds flavor, but you get a piece of the fillet and you get a whole New York strip. So the bone and the fat from the strip are gonna add more flavor to the fillet, because as you see, the fillet really doesn't have a lot of marbling. That piece is from right under the kind of spinal portion of the cow and really doesn't have a lot of marbling. I mean, if you feel your own back, that's a lot of muscle back there right against your spine. There's really not a lot of fat tissue right there. While the skirt and the flank are more from the belly of the animal, and just like us, we carry a little more fat around our middle. I think filet is like, you pay a lot for that. It takes a lot more to get that cut out of the actual steak. A lot of times they use what we call meat glue in the business to kind of form that together so you get a nice cylindrical piece. So really you're paying for the man hours, not really for how good the cut of meat is. Dry aging meat, that's something super cool. So you see on the far left, those are all dry aged. They're not quite as vibrant. They almost look like they've been cooked a little bit. Dry aging is a time controlled, temperature controlled kind of thing. Usually it's about 40 days to like 2-3 months. They're put in these like temperature air controlled boxes and literally left to kind of, we'll say age, but it's really rot. And the bacteria and mold occurs and starts growing on the outside and slowly eating away at the fat and proteins within the meat. And as it's doing that, the bacteria breaks down the meat tissue in the steak and makes it softer, supple, and gives it a more buttery texture. So when you order a dry, like a whole cut of that, they cut the outermost moldy bits off, and then you buy it from them. So I feel like it's really important to understand what things are being done to the food you put in your body. One, so you understand why you're paying so much for it, or why are you paying so much for it, like a filet. There's zero reason except for the man hours that go into it, and because we've made it seem like something that's way better than it actually is. But it's good to like know where you're getting stuff and like how to use different cuts for different things. And once we get into the kitchen, we'll talk about how to cook said cuts and add some heat to the flame. Cut.